Good morning, or is it good afternoon, everybody? I'm Melany Green. I'm the Chief Expectations Officer, CEO of Great Expectations. And we're doing an interview series this month, being Women's Month in South Africa. And while we celebrate women every day at Great Expectations, August is a month where we specifically honor and salute the strength and courage of women everywhere. And we also honor those who are leading and influencing change in whatever role that they have, as we all work together towards a fairer, a more inclusive, and a more diverse society. So it's therefore a huge pleasure for me today to welcome as my guest Dharshni Padayachee. And Dharshni has the critical role as head of transformation, inclusion, and equality at one of South Africa's biggest investment banks, Rand Merchant Bank. She's also a wife, and she's a mother of 2 sons, and boy, isn't that a big responsibility considering our topic today. So Dharshni, it really is such a pleasure to have you talking to me, and you've obviously shared with me a little bit about the background to your story, where you've landed in your career to date. And I'm sure there's going to be just many features that come naturally and spontaneously through our unedited conversation that people will benefit from and learn from today. So how about we start with you just sharing a little bit of a sort of a potted history of your career to date.
Melanie, thank you very much for having me. And I'm so glad that you highlighted that every day is Women's Day, but the spotlight is on women for this month.
Right.
So I am a chartered accountant by profession. I am a chartered accountant doing human capital work at the moment. I started my career off doing my articles at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then after my articles, I joined Rand Merchant Bank in the finance department. And I think the story of my career is one of, I don't know if you've ever heard the analogy of the jungle gym, where women's careers are not straight up the ladder, we have the jungle gym. And for me, this was very much true. So not only did I realize that I loved being a CA, and I loved the doors that it opened for me, but it wasn't finance wasn't my greatest passion. I also had my 2 boys in between. And so there were a lot of career changes for me. So 10 years into a career in finance, I was asked to put my name in a hat for a CFO position. And it was at that point that I realized I actually didn't want to be a CFO. As much as I was capable and good at what I was doing, it wasn't what I was dreaming about every night. I've always been more inclined to the people side of the business, to social justice, human rights, transformation and equality. And slowly in my career, that's how I started spending more and more of my time. And every role that I took, no matter what it was, I always ended up doing a little bit more about what I was passionate about.
So what strikes me from that, where you said that, you had this incredible opportunity of the CFO position being available and for you to kind of work towards or apply for, but actually you almost started thinking about perhaps what was more resonant for you at the time, or what was more authentic for you at the time. And it sounded like that was quite a pivotal moment in your career, when you recognized, actually, that's not what I want. I actually want to do something else, or I want to be in a different sphere within the organization.
So I think,
carry on.
So I think for me, it's exactly what you said. It's, I reached this pivotal decision point, and my first thought was, oh my word, what have I been doing for the last 15 years then? Isn't this what I've been working for all my life? And it was a scary decision as well, because at that point I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice on what is it that I wanted to do. I'm not going to say for the remainder of my career, because that might change as well. But, you know, what is it that I wanted to do to pursue what I was passionate about? And if I was passionate about it, I know I'd be giving off my best. And I know that I don't have regrets about it either.
Mm. And Darshni, the timing of that, so the timing of that change to that then started leading you to where you are today, was that before or during the period of you having children or deciding to start a family? So what was the timing of that in your sort of career journey?
So I had my first son when I was still in finance. And I'm trying to think, yes, I had my second son as well while I was still in finance. So I had two young children. I had to make this big life decision. And like I said, I really had to stop and think to myself, am I making the right decision? And I can honestly say to you, there haven't been any regrets for me. I wake up every day now loving what I do, looking forward to going to work. And yeah, and really excited about what I do.
Mm. And just back to that sort of decision that you made. Were there any doubts? I mean, did you kind of experience any self-doubt? You know, we often hear women expressing the fact that you know, there's this, the research actually tells us that in applying for a role, you know, if there's a role up for grabs, if a woman has sort of 70 to 80% of the, or she meets 70 to 80% of the criteria for that role, she still won't apply because she sort of feels like she's missing out on the critical 20 to 30%, right? So she won't even put her hand up. But where a man has perhaps only 60% of the criteria, he will put his hand up. And so, you know, that could be a major factor when opportunity arises. And I just wondered whether what was going through your head at the time when you, yeah.
That is so common. There's actually a term for it. It's called the polar principle. And there's actually a lot of research shown that women will look at a job spec and say, actually, I don't meet 20% of the criteria, so I'm not going to put my hand up for the role. Whereas men, it's exactly the opposite, where they look at a role and they think, oh, I can probably do 20% of this. I'm going to put my hand up. And at that point, I don't think that was the conversation for me in my head. It was more around what did I want the rest of my life to look at? But also, you know, saying that, I often feel a lot of imposter syndrome because, like I said, I am here as a CA in a human capital team and doing work that I didn't study for, that I didn't formally train for. But that doesn't stop me either, because you know, a lot of the skills that I received in my training and in my days of finance, I still use all of those now. And I always have to keep reminding myself is, yes, I deserve to be here. And I'm going to work hard to be here. But also, I need to sort of minimize that little voice in my head saying, you are an imposter.
Yeah, I find that imposter syndrome is a really sort of common part of a coaching conversation, and it seems to rear its head in the strangest ways, and sometimes in unexpected ways and times. And I have to say that I wasn't sort of conscious of the term. If I think back to my career, obviously long time ago in the early stages of my career and leading into mid-career. But it's hit a couple of times for me in this stage of my career, funnily enough. And I remember as an example when I when I first started Great Expectations. I was 57 years old when I started this business, and having got myself sort of equipped to get going with the maternity transition coaching. And I remember having one of my first meetings with a client. Wasn't you? But I remember having one of my first meetings with a potential client, and sort of describing what I do, and and I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I don't deserve to be doing this. I don't like, how can I possibly imagine that I have the right to even talk about this at this point? And it's amazing how that little voice in the head can be quite an irritation when you're needing to kind of get going with something.
But I think the first point is we are aware of that little voice in our heads. And then we've got to decide, am I going to step into my brave and do this?
I love that. It sort of reminds me of Brené Brown and the courage over comfort.
Yes.
And I think that, I think there is courage in all of us. It's just there are times when we suppress it. And it's actually, I think this whole celebration of Women's Month is that call to courage.
Yes.
In so many
different ways. There's a lot to be said about, the power of your tribe as well. And those are the people that are reminding you to step into that courage and step into that brave, and that keeps telling you, yes, you can do this.
Right. And so speaking of that, I mean, it's got me thinking about the idea of the tribe and who makes up that tribe. And is it other women providing that support and that encouragement? Is it men providing the support? Are they part of that tribe? If what are your thoughts on that, and specifically on the narrative that's out there that women are not really that as good at supporting each other as perhaps men are in the sort of work tribe that forms? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that I've always had women that supported me within my career and within my life. So I would dispute that fact. Although I have seen, we call it the Queen Bee syndrome. I have seen some of that as well. But I think we've got to look at the systemic issue, is that what the world has told us is that there's only one seat for a woman at the table. And so women almost feel like they've got to fight it out for that one seat. But what we really should be doing is creating more seats at the table. And that's the systemic conversations that we've been having. So I have seen a lot of power in this tribe, a lot of power in women supporting women. I heard an excellent quote the other day that said that, if you can rise, take somebody with you. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. In terms of who the conversations need to be with, it's both men and women. Because, if we look around boardroom tables, men are still largely in positions of power. And we need more active sponsorship of women. I think women get a lot of mentorship, and we get a lot of development programs, etc. But what we actually need to get us to the next level in a corporate environment is more sponsorship of women.
Oh, it is such a favorite topic of mine. And again, something that I have to admit if I look back on my career, I wasn't really aware of having a mentor or a sponsor. It wasn't something that was intentional. It wasn't a deliberate thing. It was something that almost like fell into. And I was really thinking quite hard the other day, because this topic has come up quite regularly. I was thinking the other day of, who were those people for me? And I actually have one recollection when I was in corporate of working for, it was Nissan Motor Company, funny enough, was a really interesting career period for me. And where my boss was a very outgoing, big man, big heart, and he actually took me under his wing. And I think it was probably one of the biggest growing periods of my earlier career, where I felt most validated, where I felt most encouraged that I could actually do everything. And I was the only female in the learning and development department of Nissan at the time in Pretoria. And I just felt on top of the world. And I think it was that individual as a man who played a really intentional sponsorship role with me. I wasn't aware of it being that was the relationship. But yeah, I think you're right. I think, we all know, we read about it all the time, that women need to be more intentional about finding the right people to sponsor them. Any other thoughts that you have on that, Dharshni, from your experience?
I think also, when we speak about mentorship and sponsorship, it's not just about women mentoring women. I would encourage everyone to find different mentors and people that you can draw on for different bits of information. There are only so many women in positions of leadership at the moment. And if you're waiting for someone that looks like you to be your mentor or your sponsor, unfortunately, you're going to be waiting a long time as well. But there's so much of value in finding somebody that's different to you. And it might be the person that you least realize could be your most valuable mentor or your most valuable sponsor. And so I think we've got to be more open to different opportunities, and we've got to be deliberate about it, like you said as well.
Yeah. And there's this concept that we've been exploring with one of the firms that where we're operating and serving right now, which is reverse mentorship, where you've got, and especially across generations and cultures, that you've got a younger person mentoring an older, more senior person in the firm. And there's such incredible stories coming through around age diversity, people, older people kind of learning from some of the sort of different thinking and the fresh thinking and the technological understanding that the younger generation of employees have, and young leaders. So there's so much that we could be doing to get conversation and engagement and collaboration happening so much more comfortably in organizations.
Definitely. And I don't think that we should let this virtual world stop us as well.
Good point.
I think there's a way to build connection, even if we're doing it just online. And one of the simplest ways is just to reach out to somebody, and when you're speaking to them, switch on your camera. That human connection is there already. And so we shouldn't be waiting for this new way of working to end, because it's not going to end anytime soon. And we've still got to keep going.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. I think there can be a temptation for people to almost hide behind their initials on the screen. And where the human touch is something that we've started to recognize is just so, we've missed it to such an extent over the last number of months, that this is the one way in which we can get a human touch without it being sort of physical. I think it's really, really powerful to at least
and I listened to a talk the other day, and it was so true what the speaker said. Well, she said, if you don't switch on your camera, you are invisible. And you've got to think about your own brand, and even though it's online, what do you want that brand to be?
Yeah, 100%. Great. That's actually great advice for anybody who's really looking at how they can make a difference at this time in raising their visibility and building their networks, that there's still ways and means of doing that in an authentic way, and to do it very sincerely.
Yes.
So Dharshni, I wanted to ask you now, just your raising boys as you are doing.
Hmm.
So how old are your sons, and yeah, where are they in their sort of
My
your life cycle?
oldest son his name is Kirtan, and he's 11 years old, and my youngest son, Darian, is 8 years old.
Right, lovely, lovely, lovely ages. So, yeah. And busy.
Busy, very, very busy. We are a busy household. I am in a family of boys, and luckily recently I got a girl dog at least.
To mix it up a little bit,
Yeah.
get a little bit of moral support.
Yes.
And so, Darshni, when you think about raising boys, when you think about your role in the firm and the kind of work that you're doing with RMB, and I think RMB has really been quite a beacon in the nature of work that you've been doing, and the focus on the female career, in really working towards gender parity. There's really been so much that you've done to kind of blaze the trail, I think, for other organizations. So it's quite a responsibility raising boys. What have there been anything sort of intentional that you thought about, spoken about with your husband in that responsibility of raising sons into men?
I think this topic has come up for us often, more so recently. I don't think it's something that we spoke about when we first decided to have children, but as we've been raising our boys, we've realized it's become more and more important for us to figure out what is our value system and what is it that we want to impart on our boys. Because when we talk about gender equality, it's equally important the way we raise our girls and the way we raise our boys. And it's important for us for our boys to be raised and to be surrounded by strong women, and to also equally to see the dads and the father figures in their lives celebrating women and empowering women. And so for us, it's been a lot of practical things, like what are the gender stereotypes in our family. And so I think we had a major win the other day when we were standing in the kitchen, and my son came up to us and he says to me, "Mom, I'm hungry." And his dad says to him, "But why are you just saying to your mom that you're hungry? I'm standing here too." And then, a lot of little things like pink is not just a girl's color, or, I think it's making our children aware about the things that they hear in society, because society does have a big influence on them. Mm-hmm. And to say to them as a family, that's not what we stand for. That's not the way it is here. This is what we stand for as a family.
That's great. And really, really sort of calling it.
Yes.
Yeah, good. That's fantastic.
And Melany, like I learned a very important thing from you about what were the gender stereotypes that I was enabling. So when it was mealtime, was it me just automatically going to make dinner, as opposed to saying, "Okay, guys, we're doing this together, or we're going to take turns"?
Yeah, yeah. And it kind of, it reminds me of the stats that were published, I think, by the New York Times recently, where they were looking at how women have tended to gravitate towards their stereotypical role as the sort of the caregiver, the sort of domestic worker, and that I think the stats that they quoted were that 70% of domestic work has been taken up by by the women in the household. Something like 66% of childcare, and that women were twice as likely as men to have done the homeschooling or dealt with the homeschooling.
Yes.
Even though they were women who had full-time roles and were still having to get their work done, and perform to the necessary requirements of their organizations. And so I wondered whether that's been something that has been alerted for you within the organization, and perhaps what you see as the impact of what is happening for real on the female career going forward?
I think the stats, even though they may come from overseas, I think we're seeing the same play out here. Even before COVID, I think it was said that women do 3 times more unpaid labor than men in any event. And that's caring for children, housework, even care of the elderly as well. And so we've seen this even more with COVID, where, I think previously it was, the old traditional way of men would go to work and women would stay at home and be housewives. And we've seen this change where we're now a dual career couple. It's not just women doing the housework, it's women having jobs and careers, but then it's the male roles that aren't changing at the same rate. And so we've got to have really, really open conversations about what does it mean? What does it mean for us as females if we are going to work, working full days, coming home, doing, all the housework? It's about recontracting, really. And that's something that we've had to do in our household, is to recontract as a couple and say, it's really important for both of us to have careers. And what does this mean for our duties at home? And some of it has been challenging, those old stereotypes of who does what in the household. And so it's a trend I'm definitely seeing with women in our organization as well.
And I know you and I are both in love with Jennifer Petroleri's book, Couples That Work. I know we both kind of came across it at the same time when earlier this year I said, oh my gosh, this is so fantastic. And I keep sort of thinking, wanting to send Jennifer a note to say, check your sales of this book in South Africa, because I'm responsible for a whole bunch of them. But yes, this idea of, if you are in a couple, that the idea of couples contracting, of having this intentional dialogue around where are we, what do we both want, what are our individual fears and challenges, and how do we make it work, is a conversation that needs to take place, and not just now, but as one progresses through one's marriage or partnership. Whether you're a heterosexual couple or not, it's such an important, critical piece.
Yes. And that piece on what are the stereotypes that I enable is such an important reflection for all women. It's because we've held workshops where we've had men in the organization say, but I do want to help out, and she won't let me help out.
Right.
And
That's
so,
a real issue.
and so, we've got to also look back and say, what are the stereotypes that I am not going to enable anymore in my home?
Yeah, such a valid point. So we're almost at the tail end of our time, Dharshni, and it's been so fantastic chatting with you. And just to kind of land this interview, I thought maybe you could share with us from an organizational point of view, looking at the sort of this post lockdown world, or this sort of VUCA world that we are moving into. What do you think? What's your kind of feeling that organizations should be focusing on? And then maybe we can look at it at a personal level for women, for women at wherever they are in their career right now. And with all the vulnerability that's surrounding us, what perhaps is the one piece of advice you'd give to women for their careers right now?
I think from an organizational point of view, the one benefit of this lockdown has been that, we've been pushing for flexibility for ages. And it's always been seen as something that's just for women or just for mothers who needed flexibility for their children. And now we're starting to to see that it's more acceptable, that you can really work from anywhere, and that it's something that is, you know, beneficial to both partners. And so we're seeing more men getting involved in day-to-day activities as well. And I think post this, this will continue, this new way of working will continue. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important for organizations as well to make sure that we don't undo any of the gains that we've made to date. Because, I mean, there's certain organizations, certainly ours, that have made huge gains in gender equality and female empowerment. And we've got to make sure that we don't undo those gains. Mm. And then I think it's just looking at women holistically and saying, you know, how, like I said, how do we continue to sponsor? How do we continue to mentor? What is the support our women need? Mm. And if I had to give some advice to women in, I would say, make sure that you're putting your hand up. Mm. That, you know, we're fighting for more opportunities for women, but also make sure that you're raising your hand. You know, that little voice in your head that's telling you that you can't do this, don't opt out before you even try. Get in, try it out, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least you know you would have tried with no regrets.
Right. I think that's wonderful advice. And I, when you were talking about, you know, the decisions that the organizations make at this stage in order to sort of keep the momentum of diversity and inclusion on every level, to keep that going, I think is so valid. And I almost sort of feel that decision making at organizational level should actually be intentionally through the gender lens, because I think there is a vulnerability and we definitely don't want to go backwards. We only want to move forwards.
Absolutely.
So it's been such a pleasure and a delight talking to you. And I know you're having some time out down the coast.
Highly recommend it to everyone.
Different environment, that they say. Yes. Change is as good as a holiday.
The change and the impact on mental health, just having a slightly different view is amazing.
Fabulous. And a little bit of sea air, I think, also does absolute wonders. So Dharshni, thank you again so much. And to our viewers, I just want to encourage you to please share some of your own thoughts and challenges that you've been facing in this time, or any kind of ideas and insights that you have that are going to be helpful to other women navigating this period. I think it'd be awesome if you could add those to the comments, whether this is on LinkedIn or on Facebook. We'd be delighted to hear from you, and I'm quite sure between Darsh and myself we'll add our responses where feasible or where appropriate. So thank you so much for listening, and Dharshni, thank you again for
Thank you so much for having
me. Really appreciate it. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye for now.